All right. Hello and welcome to Bloomerang Academy. We're so glad that you're joining us today. My name is Margie Worrell. I'm the curriculum manager for Bloomerang. And if you would please just drop into the chat. Tell us what the weather is like where you are today. So today in Indianapolis, it's 32 degrees and it says mostly cloudy, but there's quite a bit of sun here today. And we have Jessie Gilchrist with us. Jessie, what's the weather like where you are today?
So it is a little sunny. I'm going to call it sun for Northwest Washington State. So a little sunny, but very cold, about probably 35 degrees and sunny, but I'll take some sunshine.
For sure. Absolutely. So thank you for dropping in there. I see Northeast Ohio. We appreciate you contributing to the conversation in chat. Just a few quick items before we get started. You are attending a session with Bloomerang and Zapier that is called Automating RunSignup to Bloomerang. So that's hopefully where you thought you were going to be today. We do have a dial-in number if you should need it, 1-669-900. 6833, and I'll drop that into the chat in just a little bit here. Some housekeeping items. We do have live transcript available. If you would like that, please click on the CC at the bottom of your screen. And the chat that you're using right now to tell us about where you're joining us from and what the weather is like is a great place for you to continue to have dialogue with the other attendees inside our session today. But if you have a question that you want to have answered, please drop that into the Q&A. That way it doesn't get lost inside the chat if the chat should really get going, and we're sure that we answer that question for you. You will be getting all of the resources mentioned today at the end of the session in a follow-up email, including the slides and a recording. You also will have any questions answered that were not answered today. So if you put a question in and we haven't answered it, we will send a follow-up email with an answer to your question. So please don't worry if we're getting to the end of the session and your question is still there. And if you need any further assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to our support team at support@bloomerang.com. It's an amazing team that we have. So I'd like to take a minute to thank Jessie and introduce her. She is a Zapier certified, and she is a Bloomerang integrations consultant at Sidekick Solutions. Sidekick Solutions is a Bloomerang partner specializing in system automations with Bloomerang. And Sidekick Solutions has also been a Bloomerang user since 2013, and most recently was part of the Bloomerang team that launched the Bloomerang Zapier app. And we're really excited to have you with us here today, Jessie. So I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Awesome. So I'll go ahead and steal the screen share here, Margie. Well, thank you so much. If any of you have attended the Bloomerang Zapier Academy courses, you've probably seen me on here before. We're really excited for today and to share this next automation use case with you. The goal of today's webinar is to show how a Bloomerang integration with RunSignup using Zapier can support your fundraising efforts by reducing the time you spend performing data entry and really ensure consistency across your revenue coding in Bloomerang. So on today's webinar, we are going to introduce Bloomerang and Zapier, how they work together, and why Zapier integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. We're going to explore and actually demo in Zapier how you can use the Bloomerang Zapier app to sync race registrations and donations from RunSignup to Bloomerang, as well as how to dynamically code the fund campaign or appeal in Bloomerang. So we're going to cover each of those topics, and then we'll wrap up by talking about how you can get started with Bloomerang and Zapier today. So since we have demos throughout the webinar, I'm actually going to turn my camera off so you can see the demos full screen, because we want to make sure that you are able to see exactly how these automations are set up. And again, please feel free to add any questions in the chat as we go along. I will try to tackle those as we go through so that we're tackling them in the same order, but there may be some that we will save through the end of, or for the end of the webinar. Now, it's common for organizations of all sizes to use many types of software, and we really believe that automated integrations are essential to your donor database. Integrations can help connect the different systems you use, creating a tech stack that supports your organizations and your strategic goals. And this is really where Zapier comes in. As some of you may not be familiar with Zapier, we're going to start with a high-level overview of what Zapier is and why we believe it's a key feature of your Bloomerang system and fundraising strategy. Now, Zapier at its core is an automation software, and it enables additional Bloomerang integration and fundraising opportunities. It may be helpful to think of it as a middleware or a bridge that sits between Bloomerang and other apps you use, helping them talk to each other. Bloomerang Zapier app extends the power of your database by enabling integrations with over 5,000 other applications in Zapier's directory. And Zapier was designed for anyone to build an integration. You don't need to be a developer or know code to set up an automation in Zapier. And to really expand on that, the flexibility of the Zapier platform really enables you to build a custom integration, meaning you aren't limited to a one-size-fits-all workflow, mapping, or formatting. And you can really build an integration that's perfect for your organization and your use case. Now, integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang database and can take your fundraising efforts to the next level. Data should flow in and out of your Bloomerang database, connecting to the other best-in-class tools that you use. And by keeping Bloomerang as this kind of central hub in your tech stack, you're able to create this global record of constituent engagement with your organization and centralized reporting. Now, before we dive into the use cases, I always like to do a quick poll to see how many of you are using Zapier and how many of you are using it with Bloomerang. So thanks, Margie, for launching that poll. So if you want to go ahead and respond there, this will give us a sense of just where everyone's at today in their Zapier and Bloomerang automation journey.
Yeah, just about everyone, Jesse. I'm going to give it about 3 more seconds.
Okay.
Let's share those results.
Perfect. So looks like more than half have either never heard of Zapier or have heard of Zapier before but never used it. And actually looks like we've got about a quarter of you that are using Zapier with Bloomerang right now. So awesome. Now we are going to dive straight into our demonstrations here today because we have 2 fairly robust ones we're going to walk through. So the first one we're going to start with is we are going to demonstrate how to set up a basic sync of participant registrations and RunSignup to Bloomerang. Now, when we sync participant registrations and RunSignup to Bloomerang, there are 2 primary steps. First, we need to find or create our constituent in Bloomerang. And then the other primary step is that we want to create a donation in the timeline of that founder created constituent. All of the other steps here in this workflow on this screen are really just steps to ensure that the data flows appropriately from one system to another. Now for this demo today, I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of a qualifier, which is that we are setting up our flow today based on an assumption that our race and RunSignup does not utilize offline or paper entries for our registrations, meaning the only registrations that we're collecting for our race are coming through our race website. We're going to talk about later some different enhancements that can be made to this basic flow. But for this basic flow here, again, we're working off of that assumption that all of our participant registrations are coming through our race website. So let's go ahead and hop over to Zapier and set up our Zap. So once I'm logged into Zapier, I'm going to go ahead and click the blue Create button to create a new Zap. And this workflow starts when a new participant registration is created in RunSignup. So when I'm creating my Zap here, I'm going to go ahead and choose my app. So I'm going to search for and select RunSignup. And then I'm going to choose my triggering event. Again, in this case, we are going to use new participant registration because we want to start our automation when a new participant registration is created. Now, when we go to select our account for RunSignup, it's important to note that this will look different based on whether you are a race director or a partner in the RunSignup system. So if you are a race director, you will have an authentication in Zapier for RunSignup that is for a specific race. So you can see I have my connection here for just Conehead races. If you are a partner, your authentication and RunSignup in Zapier, which is my Sidekick Solutions partner account right here, will allow me to connect and set up automations for all of the races I have access to through my partner account. So we're going to use the partner account here for the automations we're going to demo today. And I'm going to point out just one piece that is different for partners versus race directors. But we want to go ahead and show those different elements here. So we're going to go ahead and you can see I've selected my RunSignup account. And then I go to set up my trigger. Now this race field where I'm choosing or selecting a race, this is the piece that will only display for a partner account. If you are a race director, you won't see this field as your connection to Zapier is race specific. And so when you connect that race to Zapier, that is already contained in your authentication. But for a partner, again, you'll want to select the appropriate race. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select my Conehead race here. Now, we're not going to be including these additional options here in our demo today, but it's important to note that in the new participant registration trigger for RunSignup, we have the option to include the details for any race add-ons, any custom questions we have set up, or to include the coupon details associated with that registration. Now, since we aren't going to include these, we can leave these blank, or we can set these to false. Now, the RunSignup Zapier app requires that we enter a storage key for our Zap. So this is a unique ID for our Zap, and you can see we've got some help text down here about this, but this is a key that should be unique to your Zap. So our recommendation is to use, right up here in our URL, you can see this Zap ID right here. We recommend using this as your storage key for RunSignup, or for your Zap for RunSignup. So I'm just going to copy and paste that right down here. So you can see my storage key is the same as my Zap ID right up here. This is a great way to make sure that this is a completely unique ID that you're associating with your Zap. Perfect. So I'm going to tackle really quick. Looks like we have two quick questions. First one is this an additional cost if you already use Bloomerang? So both the Bloomerang and the RunSignup Zapier apps are free to use. So if you're a Bloomerang user and you have a RunSignup account as a race director or a partner, you'll be able to set up automations for those platforms. And looks like we have another question about I don't have a Zapier account, but we use Bloomerang and are going to start using RunSignup. So yes, Zapier is an additional cost. We'll talk about this here towards the end of the webinar when we get to the getting started section. So questions about how to get started with Bloomerang and Zapier, we will tackle those here towards the end of the webinar. Now, once we've set up our trigger here, the next step is to test our trigger and generate sample data. When we test our trigger, Zapier is going to go to RunSignup and return the 3 most recently created participant registrations. Now, these records are samples only, and they're not going to run through our integration because they were created before the integration is turned on, and Zap's trigger and run in real time only. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and choose one of our recent registrations. You can see I did one here earlier for Sidekick Solutions. We're going to choose our sample registration, and this is going to allow us to set up the mapping in our subsequent steps. So if we look back at our workflow here, our first action that we're going to take following our trigger is to find or create a constituent in Bloomerang. So I'm going to go to my first action here, and I'm going to search for Bloomerang. And for my event, I'm going to choose Find Constituent. I'm going to choose my Bloomerang account. Now for the type, I'm going to set my type to individual because these are individual registrants and individual people. And so as I'm setting up the mapping for my find constituent search, again, we want to make sure that we are searching for an existing constituent first and only creating a new one if an existing one does not exist in our Bloomerang database. So I'm going to start by mapping in the details. And this operates very similarly to a mail merge where I'm just clicking in the field and then choosing the data element that was returned by my trigger event in that sample that I pulled in. So I can pull in my first name and last name. I'm going to pull in my address, phone, and my email. Now you'll see that there are two optional hydrations here on the find constituent search in Bloomerang. We don't need these for our use case. So again, we can leave these blank or we can set these to false. So when I get down here, I'm going to check this box to say create Bloomerang constituent if it doesn't exist yet. And so this allows me to pair together this search to find an existing constituent with an action to create a new one if that existing constituent or if an existing constituent was not found. So similar as we did above, I'm going to go ahead and start mapping in my participant details to the corresponding fields on my Bloomerang constituent. So our first and last name. And then we're going to come down here. I'm going to work from the bottom up. It's a little bit easier that way. We're going to map in our phone. Choose my phone type. Set this to mobile. Map in my email. And then map in my address details. Now, again, there will be recording this webinar. So if you want to try and set this up yourself, I do recommend watching that webinar as you go through because you can pause as you go through and set up your Zap and your mapping. Now, if we wanted to, we could also code any custom fields that we have on our constituent in Bloomerang if we wanted to make sure that those got coded when a new constituent was created. But in this case, I am just using name and contact information. So our next step is to come down to the bottom of this action. And similar to how we tested our trigger, I'm going to test my finder create constituent action because this is going to return a payload of data that we will use in our subsequent action steps in Zapier. So I'm going to click test action. If you come up here, it's going to show me that it's searching for a constituent in Bloomerang, and it's going to provide a confirmation when that search or create is complete. And you can see it gives me that right here. And it gives me this whole payload of data about that participant that was synced to Bloomerang as a constituent. Now, our next step in our automation right here is just a data conversion. So the RunSignup Zapier app provides the date of the registration in the UTC time zone. And so we want to set up a formatter step to not only convert the time zone from UTC to, let's say, Eastern, but we also want to remove the timestamp. So what we're going to do is use one of Zapier's native utilities. So I'm going to click the little plus symbol to add another action. And this time, instead of choosing Bloomerang or RunSignup, I'm going to use a Zapier built tool and I'm going to choose formatter. In the formatter event, I'm going to choose date and time. So this is going to allow me to transform my date and time. And for my transform, I don't need to add or subtract or compare dates. In this case, I just want to reformat a date. The input is going to be the date that we want to reformat. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in my registration date. It's already going to default my from time zone to UTC, but I want to update the time zone I want to convert it to. Again, we're going to choose Eastern today. If you are in Pacific or Mountain or Central, you could choose your appropriate time zone. And then I'm going to define that I want to return my date as a year, month, day format. I don't need that timestamp. So you can see that I can go ahead and I'm going to, similar as we did for our find create constituent, we're going to test this action so it returns that formatted date so that we can map that when we create our donation in Bloomerang. Now, the next step in our automation is to create our donation in Bloomerang. So we're going to come back in here again, and we're going to search for Bloomerang. And this time our action, instead of finding or creating a constituent, we are going to create a donation right here. Now, to make sure we create the donation on the timeline of the constituent that we found or created in this step 2 right here, we need to map the ID from that constituent right here. So if we were to click in this field, you'll see that this gives me a list of all of the constituents in my Bloomerang database. If we were to select one of these, it would actually create this donation on that same constituent for every registration coming from RunSignup, which is not what we want. So instead, what we want to do is we want to choose custom mapping right here. And from this find constituent step, we want to map the ID. So the ID is similar to an account number, but it is more unique in the sense that it is what is used by the backend code of Bloomerang. And so by telling our automation that we want to create a donation for this specific founder created constituent, it ensures that for every registration that runs through our automation, that donation is created in the appropriate constituent's timeline. Now for our date, I'm not going to map the registration date from the new participant registration trigger. Instead, I'm going to map that output from our date time formatter. So again, the year, month, day, that is in our appropriate time zone. I'm going to set my method to credit card. I'm going to map the amount paid, which is going to be the amount of my race fee, any add-ons, processing fees, things of that nature. This is the amount that the registrant or the participant actually paid for that registration. And then I'm going to select my fund, my campaign, and my appeal. So in this case, I'm going to do what's called hard coding, or assigning a static value for these fields. Conehead race, and I'm going to choose race registration. So you can see that for every donation that's going to be created in Bloomerang for a RunSignup race registration, it's going to be assigned a fund of unrestricted, a campaign of Conehead race, and an appeal of race registration. So ensuring that for this race, everything that's going into Bloomerang is going to be coded the same. Now, coding of custom fields in Bloomerang is optional. Often when we are setting up integrations between RunSignup and Bloomerang, there are 3 custom fields that we like to map. The first one is a transaction source. So it's going to tell us that this donation in Bloomerang or this transaction was created through a RunSignup automation. For our transaction ID, we're going to map in our registration ID from RunSignup. So it becomes a bit of a reference and reconciliation between the two systems. And then in our description, we're going to map in the race name and the event name. So again, giving some additional detail in those custom fields, so that if you were to pull a report from Bloomerang, you could see specifically what event they registered for, which race, as well as having that registration ID as a reference as well. Now, at this point, we could go ahead and turn on our Zap. So we could skip testing this create donation. This last one doesn't need to be tested. We could click skip test, and you'll see that Zapier would prompt us that we could publish and turn on our Zap. Now, there are 2 additional steps that are optional, which are that if a constituent is found, we can also update that constituent in Bloomerang with any new contact information that was submitted through RunSignup with that registration. So we've got time here today, so we are going to demo this really quickly. So following our create donation action, we are going to use another Zapier utility. And then this time we're going to use the filter function right here, filter. So this allows us to determine whether our Zap continues or not based off of certain criteria. So in this case, we're going to use our find constituent and Bloomerang action that we have right here. And there's a data element called Zap data was found. If an existing account was found, this field is going to return true. If not, it's going to return false, and false means that a new account was created. So we only want our automation to continue if data was found. So we're going to set this to is true right here. And so this filter, what it will do is it will only allow this update constituent action to run if in step 2, our participant matched to an existing constituent in Bloomerang. If a new one was created, then the zap will stop right here at step 5, and our update constituent action won't run. So it's just a way to ensure we're not taking action in our automation that we don't need to. Now, when it comes to doing the update constituent action in Bloomerang, this is going to look very similar to create donation, in the fact that we are going to start by mapping the ID of that found constituent from earlier in our Zap, because we want to make sure we're updating that same constituent. So we're going to choose custom mapping and choose the ID from our find constituent search right there. Now, this is where we can choose then which data elements we want to update for this participant, or with the data coming through for this participant. So again, we can map in our phone, our email. And it's important to note that for the contact information, so for phone address and email, the information, or when we are using this updated constituent function, what this does is it actually will not overwrite your existing contact information in Bloomerang. What it will do is that if this information is new, it will be promoted as the primary address, phone, or email in Bloomerang, and the prior primary information will be demoted and become secondary. So you don't need to worry that if you are mapping new contact information in this action, that it is going to overwrite your data, because if it is a new address, phone, or email, it'll be added and become the primary, and any existing contact information for, again, address, phone, or email will become secondary information. Now, that is only for address, phone, and email. Any other fields that you are mapping to or updating in your update constituent action does have an overwrite behavior to it. So important to note that everything outside of phone, address, and email is an overwrite. It'll replace existing information. But for address, phone, and email, it'll keep the old information, and the new information will just become the primary. So you can see that our steps here in Zapier now look in a linear fashion, look similar to this flow we had here, where we are triggering on a new participant registration. We are searching for creating our constituent in Bloomerang, formatting our date, creating our donation, and then if the constituent was found, updating that constituent with new contact information. Now, the workflow that we just showed is a simple standard sync when you want all registrations for a single race coded with the same fund, campaign, and appeal in Bloomerang. Now, some organizations prefer to vary this coding based on the actual event for that race that the participant registered for. And a lookup table can be configured in your automation to dynamically code the fund, campaign, or appeal in Bloomerang based on that event that the participant registered for. This allows us to do some dynamic coding. Now, a lookup table in Zapier is a way to convert data from your source application, in this case, RunSignup, to the corresponding value in your target app, Bloomerang. The lookup key is the data we want to search for or look up in our table. And sometimes this will be a really kind of human readable value or label, and other times it may be an ID for that value. Now, when possible, we recommend using IDs as it remains static, even if the front end human readable label is changed or modified. But for the use case we're going to do today, the event ID is not accessible through the race dashboard. So we are going to use the event name that the participant registered for as our lookup key. Now, if the lookup is successful and finds a match in our lookup table, what it does is that it returns a value that we can use for mapping in Bloomerang. So for example, if when that participant registration comes through, we look up the event the participant registered for, we can return a fund, campaign, or appeal that is specific to that event for our race. You know, there are two different apps that really could be used to set up a lookup table in Zapier. One is Formatter by Zapier. So that same utility that we used for formatting our date, we can also use that, or we can use a Google Sheet, or a Google Sheet. In order to build your understanding of Zapier, we're going to cover when you use one of these versus the other. But it's important to note that for automating the sync of registrations and RunSignup to Bloomerang, we recommend using a Google Sheet, and we're going to demo what this looks like here in just a minute. Now, Formatter by Zapier is often an attractive option for a lookup table because it's free in Zapier's marketplace and can be used to really create a simple lookup table where we only want to return a single value for our lookup key. It does support looking up of line items. Again, not applicable here for this use case, but it's important to note. And we can also assign a fallback value if the lookup key is not found in our table. Google Sheets is the other viable option for deploying a lookup table in your automation. And with Google Sheets, you can look up multiple values, meaning using the event that the participant registered for, we can not only just return the corresponding fund, but we could return the unique fund, campaign, and appeal that we want to assign in Bloomerang. Google Sheets is also a pretty attractive option for many organizations because it allows you to easily edit and manage that lookup table outside of your live automation in Zapier. And it can also support a lookup based on two values. Now, if this whole lookup table kind of section here seems a little advanced, Margie's going to go ahead and share a link in the chat. We did a Zapier 201 webinar last year where we took a deeper dive into lookup tables and a different use case and kind of setting those up. So Margie just went ahead and shared that in the chat. If this lookup table piece seems a little advanced, again, I recommend watching that 201 webinar as it takes a slower dive into these concepts here. Now, in this case, for our participant registration automation, we want to be able to dynamically code the fund, campaign, and appeal in Bloomerang based on the event the participant registered for. So we are going to use a Google Sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and show you our Google Sheet we've got set up here because this Google Sheet needs to be set up before we set up our automation in Zapier. So this is a demo sheet that I've just got in my Google account here. But what's really important is that we have three different data elements here for RunSignup. We have our race ID, and this is accessible in your race dashboard in RunSignup. We have the name of our race, and then we have the name of the events that we have in our race. So you can see that if we have more than one event for each race, we're going to have one row per event for that race in RunSignup. Once we've put our RunSignup details in here, we then can define what Bloomerang fund, campaign, and appeal should be assigned for registrations that come through each of those event types. So as you can see for Conehead races, the campaign and the fund are going to be the same for each event type, but the appeal will be different. But when we get to our family fun run, we have then a different campaign from Conehead races, but similar appeal codes. So this is really what allows you to do this dynamic coding and ensure that when the transaction is created in Bloomerang for the registration, it is coded with the appropriate fund, campaign, and appeal based on not only the race, but the event as well. Now, our lookup table here is going to use a two-field lookup, and this is why we are using a Google Sheet, as well as the ability to pull in both fund, campaign, and appeal at the same time. But it's going to do a lookup based off of two fields, meaning it's going to look up and find the matching RunSignup race ID, and then also for the corresponding event so that we're finding the appropriate row. Now, this lookup table will grow as we create new races and new automations because we can go ahead, just as we have our Conehead race here and our family fun run, we could add future races to our lookup table and simply define the Bloomerang values that should be assigned for each of those different events that a participant could register for. So very easy to manage this in Google Sheets outside of Zapier. Again, this is a more advanced concept. We're going to hop over to Zapier now and demo how we would actually pull this into our automation. But important to note that this is the structure we would recommend in order to dynamically code these fields in Bloomerang. So if we hop back over to our automation we had here, right before our create donation action, I'm just going to click the little plus symbol to add another step. And this time we're going to select Google Sheets as our app. And for our event, we are going to look up a spreadsheet row right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is choose my spreadsheet. So I'm going to find my RunSignup demo. And I'm going to choose my worksheet. And I'm going to choose my first lookup column, which is going to be my race ID. So I'm going to choose my RunSignup race ID. And the value I'm going to use to look this up is returned from our new participant trigger. We can pull in our race ID right here. And then for my supporting lookup column, I'm going to use the event. And I'm going to map my event name. So what this is going to do again is it's going to look up and it's going to say, here is my 86015 race ID and my 10K event. And it's going to give me this fund campaign and appeal so I can map this in my create donation action. So similar as we've done for other steps, we're going to go ahead and test this action because we want to return what this search finds. And then we're going to come to our create donation action and update that mapping for our fund campaign and appeal. So instead of selecting the value in the dropdown, we're going to choose custom. And from our lookup spreadsheet row, we're going to map the field that was returned. So what this allows Zapier to do is that every time the automation runs, when it gets to step 4, it's going to dynamically look up based off of the race and the event the participants registered for. It's going to look up the appropriate Bloomerang coding and then make sure when we create that donation that it's coded appropriately going into Bloomerang. Now, before we dive into our next use case, I want to cover some other enhancements that can be made to this basic registration sync in syncing these participant registrations to Bloomerang. So some organizations offer free registrations and prefer not to have a $0 transaction created in Bloomerang. There are ways to filter those out. If you have international participants, there are ways to convert the address data coming from RunSignup to put it in the format needed for Bloomerang for international addresses. There are ways to support offline registrations, so those manual entry or imports of paper race registrations into RunSignup. We can convert RunSignup data into Bloomerang custom fields and also map custom questions, add-ons, or coupon details. So lots of options to enhance and customize this workflow for your organization's use case, but we wanted to start by demoing that basic sync here today. Now we're going to transition and cover how to set up a basic flow for syncing race donations from RunSignup to Bloomerang. Now this flow is very similar to our registration flow. Really the only difference is going to be our triggering action and an initial delay. So 2 primary actions we're performing here. Again, we are finding or creating our constituent in Bloomerang, creating our donation in Bloomerang in the timeline of our founder created constituent. The primary difference between these 2 zaps is this delay step right here. The reason why we have a delay in the donation automation is for those instances when a participant makes an optional donation at the same time they register. If the new participant registration and this new donation zap both trigger at the same time, it may result in 2 accounts being created in Bloomerang. So by offsetting our donation flow, it makes sure that if a new constituent is created in our registration automation, that 2 minutes later, when our new donation automation runs, we are finding that constituent account that was just created. So again, working to ensure that we are not creating duplicates in Bloomerang. Now, this use case we're walking through here again today is following the same assumption we did for the registration flow, which is that our race does not utilize RunSignup's offline donation functionality. Instead, all donations for this race are coming through our race website. Now let's hop over to Zapier and set up this zap. So I'm going to go ahead and just create another zap here. And we're going to choose RunSignup. And this time, our triggering event instead of new participant registration is going to be new donation. I'm going to choose my partner account again, just to show that race selection. So again, this race selection is only for partner accounts. If you're a race director, you won't need to do this selection. And then we're going to enter our RunSignup storage key. Again, I'm going to use my Zap ID up here in my URL, as I know it's completely unique. And then I'm going to go ahead and test my trigger right here to pull in up to 3 recent donations for my race. Grab the one I did earlier today. Perfect. Similar to our participant race registration, we have this payload of data that we can use when setting up our mapping from RunSignup to Bloomerang. So similar to how we did in the last automation, we're going to start by creating our first action. And this time we are going to use Zapier's delay utility right here. And we are going to use delay 4. And for our action, we are just going to put 2 and then select minutes. So again, this is going to make sure that our donation flow is offset from our registration flow, so that when the registration flow runs, and if it does happen to create a new constituent, this donation flow, if the participant also made a donation, would match to that existing constituent. So we can skip the test on this one. We don't need to test our 2-minute delay here. And then we get to proceed with similar actions as we did in our registrations app. So we're going to find or create our constituent, convert our date, and create our donation. The new donation trigger and RunSignup returns data in a very similar manner to participant registration, meaning our name, our address, our phone number, our email are all returned in very straightforward and easy to find fields. So we're going to go ahead and set up our search and our create constituent in the similar way we did for registrations. And then we're going to check the box to create a new constituent if one doesn't exist. I'm actually going to start from down here. Again, just mapping in my details of what I would want to assign if we are creating a new constituent in Bloomerang. Now, it's important to note up here, and I guess I skipped over this on the find and create for the registration, but your informal name, formal name, envelope, and recognition, you can leave these blank and Bloomerang will automatically generate them based off of its data entry rules. So same as if you are manually creating a constituent in Bloomerang where it automatically generates those for you, the same thing is going to happen here in this automation. So now that I've mapped my fields, I'm going to come down and I'm going to test my actions so that it returns that payload of data with that constituent ID that I can use on my create donation action. Now we're going to do that same date formatting that we did in our registrations app. This time we're using the date of the donation instead of the registration date. So we're going to format our date. In the same manner, we're going to choose our time zone and the year, month, day format. And we're going to test this action in order to return that output that we can map on our create donation action. Now we're going to create our donation. Again, choosing custom for this constituent field and mapping the ID from our prior find or create constituent action. Mapping our date from our formatter. Choosing credit card. And then mapping the amount of our donation. Now you can choose to map the donation amount or the amount paid. The amount paid is going to include those processing fees, really kind of organizational preference there. And then in this case, we aren't able to identify which event the participant registered for, as the donation is a separate object in RunSignup. So in this case, we are typically hard coding our fund, campaign, and appeal. So in this case, unrestricted, the name of my race, and then I'm going to choose it. I've set up an appeal for race donation. Now we can code our custom fields in a similar manner. So we've got, whoops, not Shopify. We've got a transaction source custom field. We're going to say that it's coming from RunSignup. We're going to pull in our donation ID from our trigger. Again, just that reference between the two systems if we need to reconcile. And then in our description for this one, we're going to use our race name and we're going to just type in and say it's a donation. So whereas our registrations have the race name, a hyphen, and then the event the participant registered for. In this one, we're going to have the race name, a hyphen, and then type in the word donation so we can distinguish that this was a donation associated with this race. Now, again, at this point, we could be done editing and we could skip testing this step and publish and turn on our Zap. Alternatively, you could add, similar to the registration flow, that filter that if a constituent is found to then update that constituent with new contact information. We're not going to show those two actions here, as the mapping is very similar to what we did for participant race registrations. We're going to go ahead and move forward and talk about how to get started with Bloomerang and Zapier. Now, the first step in getting started is signing up for a Zapier account if you don't have one already. All Zapier accounts begin with a 14-day free trial of what's called their professional tier. And following that 14-day free trial, your plan is converted to a free plan until you choose to upgrade. Now, most organizations will need to upgrade to Zapier's starter plan at a minimum in order to build Zaps like the ones we've demoed today. These are considered multi-step Zaps, and Zapier requires a starter plan at a minimum. Now, it's important to note that Zapier does have a nonprofit discount. So I think Margie's going to go ahead and share the link to that in the chat. If you do sign up for Zapier, or you have already signed up for Zapier, make sure to apply for Zapier's 15% nonprofit discount because it is a helpful resource there and discount for our nonprofit organizations. After you sign up for Zapier, connecting your Bloomerang database is really easy. You're going to go to My Apps in your Zapier account, click Add Connection, search for and select Bloomerang, and then you'll be asked to grant access to your Bloomerang database using your Bloomerang login credentials. Now, some organizations that we work with prefer to use or set up a Bloomerang user that is specifically used for automations. So setting up a Bloomerang user named Zapier tied to an info at or support at or some kind of generic email alias for the organization, because this ensures that the automation and that connection in Zapier is future-proofed in the face of staff turnover. So if you have staff turnover or you do have some type of a team email that you can use for setting up a Bloomerang user, it's a great idea to create a Zapier user in Bloomerang and use that to connect your Bloomerang account to Zapier. That just makes sure that that connection doesn't get dropped if an individual's user in Bloomerang gets deactivated when they transition from the organization. Now, we covered quite a bit today. For some organizations, this makes a lot of sense and they want to go ahead and try and set up these automations DIY. For other organizations, they'd like a little bit of help. So if your team would like support setting up an automation from RunSignup to Bloomerang, we offer an integration bundle for Bloomerang customers. And this bundle includes end-to-end configuration and deployment of the automations we talked about today for OneRace and RunSignup. Now, this is optional, and your organization absolutely can instead choose to implement your Bloomerang automations in Zapier yourself. It is important to note that this bundle right here does not include Zapier subscription costs. You will need to contract with Zapier separately and sign up for Zapier separately and choose a subscription for that. Whether you're building automations DIY or just want to learn more about Zapier, there are plenty of resources available. So you can search for available apps in Zapier's marketplace. You can look at Bloomerang Zap templates or even review Zapier's Help Center. There are lots of resources available out there. Bloomerang also has a slew of resources in its knowledge base about Zapier, and I know that RunSignup does as well about their Zapier app. So both of those platforms have been doing a great job about documenting their Zapier integration capabilities. So outside of Zapier's resources, you can also lean into your Bloomerang knowledge base and RunSignup knowledge base as well. Really appreciate everyone attending today. We are going to have some time for questions here. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and add those in the chat. And Margie's going to launch a poll. If you have any questions about automation use cases or want to work with a consultant, please respond to the poll and let us know. Again, we're happy to offer a free consult just to talk through your organization's automation use cases, whether these involve Bloomerang and RunSignup or not. We are Zapier certified experts and happy to talk any automation use case. So feel free to let us know if you'd like a follow-up and we will go ahead and get a consult scheduled with you. And we'll go ahead. If there are any questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. We've got about 8 minutes left here and happy to answer any questions that anyone has about Bloomerang automations in general or integrating RunSignup with Bloomerang.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I just want to say I really think it's so helpful to see you walk through those zaps because it's just so fascinating to see how those steps all come together. And I appreciate too having the slide that ties in with it. That's really, really great.
Yeah, we did. I guess that's one thing we should have mentioned at the start. The slides that we have here in the slide deck, when you get these after the webinar, there are also screenshots of everything we walked through today. So if you prefer to view a screenshot as opposed to the live recording, those screenshots are available in that slide deck as well.
Awesome. Well, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop those into the chat or into the Q&A for us. We're happy to have Jessie answer any questions that you might have regarding Zapier, any of the integrations that they offer. It's a wonderful opportunity because of the fact that Zapier can really help connect all of the software that you currently use, or a lot of the software that you currently use with your Bloomerang database. And it's going to save you a lot of time and effort. So again, Jessie, we're really grateful to you for being here today.
Absolutely. It's always our pleasure.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Thank you all for participating with that. And Jesse, since I have you here, I'm just curious, what's one of your favorite integrations that with Bloomerang and Zapier? Do you have one that you think really is a great example that a lot of nonprofits utilize?
Yeah, I've been getting this question a lot lately, and the ones that have been top of mind for me recently are Bloomerang to Bloomerang automations. So automating those functions you're doing in Bloomerang manually right now. So for some organizations, this is updating membership custom fields on the constituent following a new membership payment. For other organizations, it's coding custom fields on a transaction after a donation comes through a Bloomerang donation form. So some of those custom fields that you don't want to be visible to the donor on your donation form, but you want to make sure get coded in Bloomerang on the back end. Really, those, I like to think of them as those operational automations. So things that your team is manually doing now or managing manually. I love those automations because they are quick kind of ROI and time savers, even within the Bloomerang database itself.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know in the nonprofits I've worked with in the past, our administrative people worked so hard on entering data. And when I look at this, I think back to those days and think, wow, they would have really benefited from having the ability to automate some of that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you all for being here with us today. We greatly appreciate it. And again, feel free to reach out at any time to Bloomerang. Also, Jessie has left her information. You can definitely reach out to her with more questions regarding Zapier. So we hope to, and again, Jessie, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much, Margie. And thank you everyone for hopping on today.
Great. Everyone have a great day. We hope to see you on another Academy. Oh, guess what? We have a last minute question, Jessie.
Is Zapier only for automation or will there be other webinars about other functionality? So Zapier is an automation platform. So at its core, any of the webinars we do in Bloomerang Academy centered around Bloomerang and Zapier are going to be about automated use cases. I guess I would be curious for the individual that submitted that question, if there's other functionality you're interested in, if you want to go ahead and type that in the Q&A as well. Happy to talk through what other functionality is that you're looking for in the Zapier platform. But yes, Zapier is an automated automation platform. So all the Bloomerang and Zapier webinars are going to be focused on those automated use cases.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessie. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you on our next Academy webinar. Have a great day.